I don't know what this was. Well, I mean, it's just outage. Yeah. This is Dano.
Wave, I got wave.
You ready? All right. Is there a motion to reconvene the budget evaluation team meeting? Okay, Mr. Davidson has made the motion. Mr. Lambert has made a second. Kelly said sometimes it's hard to ascertain who's making motions and seconds. So I will try to remember to repeat it, but let's try to do our votes and all of that stuff. Make sure our mics are on and we're speaking into the mic. Kelly, thank you for all you're doing. I really appreciate it. She keeps the trains on track. All right, so there's a motion and a second. We'll do a roll call vote. Ms. Mertens?
Aye.
Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Mr. Davidson?
Aye.
Mr. Lambert?
Aye.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Aye.
Ms. Laurent?
Aye.
Ms. Miller?
Aye.
And Compton is an aye. That will serve as our roll call as well. Item number 1, discussion of possible action to set date, time, and place. Meeting will reconvene in the event technical difficulties arise during the course of the meeting that cannot be corrected within a maximum of 30 minutes. Anybody?
Tomorrow at 10 o'clock?
I think there's
10 o'clock.
another meeting.
Tomorrow at 9 o'clock?
I think at 10. I was going to say 9 would probably be good. All right, Mr. Lambert has moved
Second.
to 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, BOCC room, and Ms. Mertens has seconded. Ms. Mertens?
Aye.
Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Mr. Davidson? Aye. Mr. Lambert?
Aye.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Aye.
Ms. Lauren?
Aye.
Ms. Miller?
Aye.
And Compton is an aye. Item number 2, discussion and possible action to receive an update from Emergency Response Committee. Mr. Barnes, do you have anything additional beyond what was discussed at our previous convening?
Specific discussion. I know there's a lot of discussion about leveraging funds, identifying methodologies for PPE. I'd be happy to discuss any of that as well.
Did the Emergency Response Committee make a recommendation at all this afternoon?
They did. I don't know if it was a formal recommendation, but it was certainly a consensus for requesting $500,000 to be made available from the CARES Act funding for the purchase of PPE for Oklahoma County purposes.
Joe, you're on that committee as well as I am, or if I recall correctly, we made a motion for recommendation to fund $500,000 to the end of this FY and fund $1,400. So that would be probably the big update.
Okay.
I think they call that needing a witness.
It's fine, it's your witness.
Oh, okay.
Any other discussion? Okay. Is there a motion to receive the update?
This says discussion of possible action. Oh, no. Is there anything wrong with BET making a recommendation as well to support the Emergency Response Committee for the expenditure of $500,000 out of Fund 1400 for PPE?
I don't see that. Is that a motion?
I will make that a motion.
Which agenda item are we using here? I'm completely supportive of
No, I get that.
the idea. I'm just, I don't know where,
Well, it says discussion of possible action
okay,
to receive
an update.
to an update. Yeah.
But that doesn't allow the latitude to
take action on an update?
We can receive it.
Okay.
We can make that change at subsequent meetings. It's a great idea.
Sounds great.
So I think as it relates to the 500,000 at the next budget board meeting, I think there was a special one scheduled for Tuesday. Looking at, I mean, there's a bunch of meetings on Tuesday. We can get into this when we get to item 4, but there's really not a spot for us to be able to meet, I don't think, on Tuesday, maybe Wednesday. But I think I can have the discussion with budget board similar to this morning that there seemed to be a consensus of in favorment, going to make up a word, but no actual vote on this. So, all right, was there a motion to receive the update?
On
Yep.
the emergency management recommendation, is that a recommendation to the OCC?
Actually, if I recall correctly, we talked about that. So the ERC has the ability to make a recommendation to the OCC and budget board, but since budget board was coming up, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, we did budget board first.
You did
We
both
did both, yeah.
recommendations as well.
All right, is there a motion to receive the reports?
Motion to receive.
Second.
Ms. Miller made the motion. Mr. Davidson seconded to receive the update from Mr. Barnes as the representative of the Emergency Response Committee. Ms. Mertens?
Aye.
Mr. Morrison? Aye. Mr. Davidson?
Aye.
Mr. Lambert? Aye. Mr. Honeycutt?
Aye.
Ms. Lauren?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
And Compton is an aye. Thank you, Mr. Barnes. Item number 3, discussion and possible action regarding policies and procedures related to the newly established Special Project Fund 1400 CARES Act. Actions may include but not be limited to establishing a tracking mechanism for requests, development of guidelines, and receiving documents as necessary. I think we had talked about an application that Tulsa County is utilizing for their internal county expenses. We were all going to look at that. I think everybody was going to consider what they thought would be a good timeline as far as scheduling of meetings. Those were the 2 items discussed last time. We're not limited to only discussing those 2 things here, but
You want to take the application first or which one first?
whichever. Sorry, I was processing this. We don't have 48 hours.
So the state has gotten a order similar to 2009. They're doing a tracking and application website for people to apply to the CARES Act for everybody else. I think it may be helpful, and I haven't seen, this is Tulsa County's, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
We probably want to see the states and then the cities, Oklahoma cities as well. I would hope there's a lot of crossover and very similar items, but if we're going to take a look at this, it may be advantageous to take a look at multiple instead of one. And let's just get some information from the other 2 biggest entities in the state to see what they are or aren't doing that we may be able to adopt or not.
Yeah, my understanding, and I could be wrong, I think the state of Oklahoma is mostly doing reimbursements, right, after expenses. And the majority of this application stuff is related specifically to future and not reimbursements. So the application that the state has for reimbursement would be different than this. I think as we look towards other buckets besides an internal bucket. I think we definitely want to consider what the others are utilizing, but I don't know that the state would necessarily be applicable to our internal side. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I saw they were doing it on a reimbursement basis.
I think you're right, but I mean, the reasoning for the reimbursement is to, and that's not a hard and fast that we have to do that, but one of the reasons for the moving to the reimbursement is to, in my opinion, cut down on some of the frivolity of some of the expenses. So if you're able to front fund it, and it is COVID related and you probably already made those expenditures, then that's going to be reimbursement on our side as well. So I get it both ways. I do.
I do not disagree with you. I think that there is a great benefit of just utilizing a reimbursement process and no front money, because then you're able to see what the expense actually was, what was actually spent, the documentation that helps know what you're going to have for your audit trail ahead of time. Whereas if you're front funding, then you don't know exactly what documents you're going to get on the, for your audit piece. However, doing that also has some pretty stiff limitations on being able to help immediately, especially as it relates to potentially nonprofit buckets and
no, I don't disagree with that. I just think it's going to be
small business.
Smart for us to do both.
Mm-hmm.
Work done, and that's what I'm saying is that we really need to get more information, and it's just as one. I'd like to see the cities and the states, and kind of, and again, I think we could take a little bit of time and homogenize the three together and come up with the best of the best. And not all of them are going to need to be reimbursements, but some of them are going to need to be swift, more payments than they are reimbursements, similar to the whatever. But I understand what you're saying, and I think we're on the same boat. But
well, and one thing I don't know if I was clear, but what I would envision something like this, whether it's this exact, well, it wouldn't be this exact language because there needs to be a few tweaks. But whether it was this exact language or something similar, this would be something that we would be utilizing for county expenses. This is not something that, in my mind, we would use for any of the other buckets. It would be county expenses only. The other buckets, we would have different process, procedure, application that would all look completely different. And I did get from Tulsa County, I received, and I'll get this to you guys a little later in the conversation, but I did get the city and a municipality application that was sent to me, as well as the affidavit and their COVID expense tracker form. I do have all of those, but that's what they're utilizing as well. They're doing completely separate application processes for each one of their buckets.
okay. So that probably lines up more with like what I'm thinking and saying. Okay.
Is there something that we could do now to start the process for internal then? Just internal only at this point?
I think what we could do, and I'm trying not to recreate the wheel because we have lots of needs and we need to address them as quick as possible, but also with diligence and making sure that we're doing it right. Tulsa County got a little bit of a head start on us. They've done some legwork, so that's kind of the reason why I'm looking at their stuff. I think what we could do to address the internal stuff as quick as possible is adopting something similar to the COVID expense tracker form that I'll pass out in a minute, that would allow departments to fill out a document that says what their expenses that they've already spent, what they were for, when they made them, why they made them, and all of that. And that stuff can get back to us as soon as the departments can get the information. And as they get that, then we can look at those and make sure that the documentation is there. It's clear that in this group's mind that it meets the requirements that Treasury has set. Then we can make recommendations on those reimbursables, internal county-only reimbursable expenses. Then you also, at the same time, you start an application process for future expenses. That way, as departments are coming up with ideas of things that they need, then they're able to get that to this group ahead of them making the purchase, because I would hate for departments to make purchases under the assumption that it's going to be a COVID expense related item, and they use their general fund dollars and just thinking they're going to get reimbursed. And then this group may not make a recommendation, or maybe we do make a recommendation and budget board or BOCC says, no, we don't like that. So have the application process in place so that as they have things that come up, they can fill out the application, get it to us, we look at it, make a determination whether we want to make a recommendation. We do, and we get it immediately to to budget board, and then budget board gets it on for BOCC next Wednesday. So I think having a reimbursement tracking sheet and having an application for future internal projects is something that we need to move forward ASAP, in my mind. And it touches to Mr. Barnes's issue of stuff that he has to get, facilities, and there's going to be probably technological needs that other people are still going to need that they haven't been able to get yet. So
Are you envisioning two separate forms or submissions, or are you looking at one submission with it identified as a reimbursement or a future procurement?
we can structure it however we think would be best. I do like what Tulsa's doing and separating the two, the past and the future. And you've got different questions that need to be answered if it was a past expenditure, and maybe not just questions, but different documentation that's going to be available and whatnot. So to me, it seems like it's a different process. So you would have two different guidelines on what a department needs to do to seek reimbursement for past expenses versus the information that they need to put forward to get approval for future projects. So I do think that it would be, in my mind, beneficial to have it two different ways there.
And that would be consistent regardless of us or the city.
I think the city and the whether
city, I mean those submissions that come back to us, not necessarily we would impact that with Oklahoma City saying this is the way you're going to do it.
I think whatever the other buckets that ultimately budget board and BOCC decide that they want to have, whether it's similar to Tulsa County having 4 buckets or 7 buckets or 3 buckets or 5 buckets, whatever it is, in my mind, the application and the approval, I'm sorry, not the approval, but the application process, the guidelines that we put forward are going to be different for most all of those buckets. So I think all of those will need to have a little bit different application process. And it may be one of those things that on some of the buckets, maybe the cities, we do like what the state does, and it's only reimbursement. It's not hey, give us a project that you're wanting to do and we'll front fund it. Maybe some of the buckets we want to only do as reimbursements and not future. But I think each one of those needs to have completely separate consideration for what the internal mechanisms that we utilize. Now, the process would still be the same. They would fill out whatever it is they need to fill out. They would get it to the county in the same manner that everybody else does. It would come before this group for a recommendation, go to budget board and go to BOCC, but the packet would be a little bit different based upon the bucket that it falls in. That's just the way I envision it. But
did you go over the buckets for the city?
this,
Oklahoma City?
yes, those last I spoke with them, it was still a work in progress and not anything to push forward publicly yet. But generally speaking, I will say, just generally, everybody that I've talked to, it appears as if everybody's speaking the same language, looking at the same things. So.
Let's break this down. I mean, I understand what Miles is saying about gathering the information to meet from the other entities. I feel like that's going to be very beneficial, especially when we're going outside of our walls.
Absolutely.
I don't see any reason why we can't come up and get moving on just the reimbursement and do a form asking for reimbursement for expenditures, say March 1st through May 15th. Get this turnaround done, get those paid, get it done before June 30th, back in clearly general funds. We won't appropriate back. So, but anyone that's paid out of special revenue funds, get that done, get Mr. Barnes taken care of, make sure a recommendation gets done from our board, and just start. Let's just get started. I don't think the reimbursement part was too tough for us to kind of come up with on our own, and just start with that. Get some stuff going.
Christy, I'm tracking exactly what you're saying. I would like us to move on something for future internal as well as quick as possible, because we are going to have instances. It seems like hopefully we're going to be able to get Mr. Barnes taken care of pretty quick, but it's likely that we're going to have some other things come up in the not too distant future that has not already been paid for, but needs to occur, at least in that department's opinion. So it would be nice to be able to have a process to get that to them. But I do think prioritizing like that, and maybe if we only have time to, if you guys think we only have time to get the reimbursement piece kind of worked out right now, and then move on to the other internal component down the road, that's fine with me. Let me go ahead and pass this out. This is the expense tracker. This isn't exactly, well, let me pass it out for us. So the first couple pages are kind of instructions, but when you get to the third page, this is something that's on their internal website, so there will be drop downs. I already spoke with Mr. Coffey in IT. He felt like they could do something like this, and if we do want to move to something similar to this, I can meet with him and go over in more detail on what we're going to do. But first one's just a drop down menu, so you'd open it up and you'd pick what department you're in, and then if there's a division in your department, then you would do that. Name, the date of the expense, the amount of the expense, the PO number that was associated with it, and then the purpose of the expense. So it would just be a dialog box that they fill out and say, you know, why was that purchase necessary to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, and then the other drop downs to answer: was the expenditure as a result of COVID-19 pandemic? Was it anticipated and included in your budget? And did it occur between the March 1 and December 30? Those last three are obviously the three requirements from Treasury. So those are answered to make sure that that they're recognizing they fit into there. But then the dialog box up above is for more in-depth explanation beyond just a yes or. I guess you don't even need to put no on there, because if the answer is no, that it doesn't, then you don't need to submit it. But anyway, So something like that is something that we could utilize for a reimbursement piece. So every department can go on, fill out, and we can track it. Danny, we had talked last time about maybe having a special code that we set up in Munis. Is that, if that's possible to where if somebody's making a purchase and they're hoping to, and I hope this doesn't necessarily occur, but if somebody's making the purchase, hoping that they're going to get reimbursed for CARES dollars later, that we can run a report at any given time and see what items are in Munis that have been paid, that have that special unique identifier that may be a reimbursement down the road.
Yeah, we could set up an object code or two within the system that identifies this as a COVID-19 expense. And then if it comes through and it doesn't qualify as an expense, we could always do a journal entry to change that code. So we're only tracking the actual expense.
Okay. Well, and that's something that not Tulsa County, but I think the state of Oklahoma has also made a requirement that in your general ledger system, you have some type of unique identifier. I think I read that in the state's requirement as well. And then it would also be beneficial if there is in the future, we approve a project and when they cut the PO, it's already in there. So on the audit side, everything that at the end of the day, if we say, or budget board or BOCC says this isn't an expense, like you mentioned, that code would be taken away. So at the end of the day, the only items left that have that code will be items that wound up utilizing those dollars. So on the audit piece, in my mind, I would think that it would make it easier for us come audit time, because we'll be able to readily identify what all projects were in there.
Right. Now, are we talking about expenditures going forward for departments to use this code if they're spending money out of their own budget?
I think if they are expending money out of their own budget with the idea that they're going to seek a reimbursement of it, then it would be good to have that identified. That way we know what the potential liability that's sitting on the books is.
Would there be a need for that since we have the funds? Wouldn't they just come through this board, request funding, and that would all be paid out of the special revenue fund?
Yes, but if you've got a department that is making a purchase, not coming to us ahead of time, not coming to budget board or BOCC ahead of time on the project, just moving forward on a project under the assumption, well, I'm just going to use my general fund or my special revenue dollars to do this, and then I'm going to seek reimbursement later. If that item had the code identified with it, we could always go in there and say, oh, here's $400,000 worth of projects that have not come to us. We didn't even know about them, but they are sitting out there and they may come to us for reimbursement. So we just kind of know and we're not surprised.
I figure once we got everything in place, we would discourage them using their own and go through the process to come straight out of the fund. And expenses that have already been made, it'd be hard to go back and put a code on it. I mean, I like this idea of where each office and department sits down, plugs these things quick. I mean, it looks like you could put in your expenses pretty quick, and then it would, for that department or that office, then it would do a summary, print off the summary of what they've entered. And they would then use that piece of paper with a quick application to get reimbursed.
I'm fine with that. I mean, I would rather have, as long as the message is out there loud and clear, that once the only reimbursement that you're going to get for purchases are going to be for purchases that were made between March 1 and whatever date today, for instance. So going forward, we're not going we're not gonna look at anything for reimbursement. You're gonna have to get approval ahead of time if you want to utilize CARES dollars. That's what I'm hearing you say. Is that right? As long as we're loud and...
Date today, obviously.
Right. But as long as we're loud and clear on that, I think that's the best way to do it. I just don't...
Yeah, unless there's some unforeseen emergency where the department has to go out and purchase something, can't wait for this process to take place. Going through our committee, but I would think that would be rare.
So for purposes of this form, the last question, did you incur this cost between March 1? You could set a date and other than December 30 and cut that off. That way,
Sure.
you know,
Yeah.
that kind of alleviates that.
Yeah, and I don't know why Tulsa County is doing it on an ongoing basis, because I had those same thoughts, but if Budget Board doesn't want to make that declaration that we're not going to do reimbursements after date X, if you make a purchase, that purchase is on your own. We're not considering it. If they're not willing to do that, then I think we do need an identifier to be able to track and see. But if we're going to set that in motion, that there's no reimbursement after this initial these initial purchases, then you're right. I don't think we need that identifier.
So what other information on here, besides what has the opportunity to be provided, might we need just on a reimbursement basis only?
I would definitely like to see, and I know it's asking for the purchase order number, and we don't look that up, but I'd like to see, you know, name, date of expense, amount, what fund it came from.
Yeah, the fund.
Then maybe purchase order number.
I'd like to see the check number.
Okay.
Yeah.
Easier to track.
Fund check number.
Would it be relevant if that PO is a blanket, since we have the number and we can look it up and see if it was a
Do
standard?
individual departments see the check numbers later? Because if they put it through AP and it goes out on ACH, some departments may be calling your office a lot for a check number.
We'll send instructions how they can look at it.
Self-help.
Hopefully that's not through you.
Yeah, definitely.
Any other information, would it be pertinent, or would this be sufficient?
Okay, so the fund that it was paid out of, the check number, a copy of invoices.
Well, you could usually go pull that up when you search the purchase order, right?
Right, but I don't want us to have to go in and start doing all of that research. I think if we have another box that is attach a document, and you attach a copy of the check, a copy of the invoice, and we would still have a box where they would put the check number in there, but they would also attach a copy of the check and a copy of the invoice. And that way we can just print all of that stuff out. We have the packet, and we're not having to go and look for everything.
Right, good idea.
That would be some good detail. When you're down to actual PO and check.
How do we anticipate handling our deputies that are working these special shifts? Would that be something that we just would submit for payment directly from the CARES account?
Have you, because you've had additional deputies already, right?
Correct.
And you've
So
already
these-
incurred and paid for some, right?
Right, so this would be kind of a reimbursable / continuing. Because we just started this when the courts reopened.
Are these deputies paid out of your special revenue fund or your general fund?
The majority of them are paid out of the special revenue. I think we're utilizing some reserves. I think we're utilizing some school resource officers. So some of them are general, some of them are special revenue.
About the rest of the board, but I would assume if you've incurred and paid it, that's clearly a reimbursement. And it would
Right.
just go
So we've not paid for the actions that have only just occurred this week. So we haven't paid anything yet.
I would say it would be something like, we're talking about it for emergency management. He's come up with an amount out of the CARES blanket for payroll, or, you know, some kind of amount to draw down on.
I think that makes the most
Y'all know there's
sense.
deputies, y'all know there's face masks. It's almost like how a blanket would work.
Right. That makes the most sense to me.
That makes what? No sense?
No, the most sense.
Oh, okay.
I thought it did no sense too.
I was fine with whatever answer, but. Yeah,
Most.
clearly you're gonna pay these deputies through the payroll system. And you need to get the money back and be able to draw down, you know, get to the CARES money and draw down.
Right.
So what's your solution so that doesn't have to be a reimbursement?
Are you waiting, like, it'll be on their May 31st pay, right? What they've worked so far?
Correct.
Okay.
Well, we are completely tracking this separate. This assignment is completely separate from any of their regular assignment. They're not allowed to work during their assigned hours on this particular assignment. So it is 100% separate, and that's why we think, you know, it's just best just to go directly to the CARES to draw down on that.
I speak for payroll, they have set up a special code for these deputies, so we can easily track the expense and then seek reimbursement from the CARES fund. Go back into your special revenue funds.
Are you thinking then after each payroll, then they would ask for that money? Like after May?
That's the way I foresee it, yeah.
So that would be a reimbursement going forward, which is a little different than what we talked about a minute ago.
Because the main thing is we can't really attach this to the special revenue accounts because this isn't a budgeted expense. You know, all the people that are currently in those accounts are reimbursable off of the contract. And so, you know, that we're really not set up to incur something out of those funds. So that's why I think it's best just to go directly to the CARES Act, drop down from that.
So, I'm sorry.
We would certainly discuss setting up salary accounts within the CARES Act. Obviously, we don't have that set up right now. It's all in M&O right now, but to be able to draw down, if this is going to be occurring every month, to run the payroll straight out of that fund, of course, that,
They get 2 advices, they get 2 paychecks,
yes,
which is fine, direct deposits on payday.
right. And that could be submitted through this committee or not, or budget board for approval before that's processed.
So ahead of processing of payroll, instead of normally they just send it to your office, they would send whatever amounts need to be paid for out of the CARES account, send it here, we look at it, make a recommendation, and get it on for budget board for approval. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, payroll is on such a tight timeline anyway, when we get these POs from departments, so that would be a big time crunch, but yeah. Then we probably have to have a special team meeting to be able to handle that.
That would be okay when it's time for the 2 reporting.
You know, and these, I don't know that these special shifts are directly really tied to payroll as much. So I don't know if we'd be under the same type of time restrictions, but we can talk about that thing.
Whether it's holding.
Yeah. I'll have to have that discussion with Aaron Spitzer, our payroll director, and come back with a plan to this board.
Okay. Well, and to an extent, this is going to be a learning process as we go through and have to adjust. Things.
But I will say this month will be a reimbursement. I mean, it'll be processed as we have it set up, where they're being paid out of special revenue funds or general funds. So you'll have to submit a reimbursement request for this month at least. Yeah.
Okay.
So speaking of setting up a cost center for salaries. You know, Mr. Barnes had talked to me earlier. He had an agenda item to set up a cost center for emergency management for the 500,000. Do we want to do that for instance, facilities and for emergency management? I mean, I don't envision if we did something like that, we're going to do a whole lot of those, but
I had this discussion with Mr. Barnes earlier about, we've already set up a cost center for the CARES Act within the fund. So there's CARES Act 350. So I don't see the reason to set up another cost center just for emergency management. Kind of like we talked about last time, we've got these buckets that we're setting up.
we can do sub-accounts or
Yeah.
whatever underneath that. I got you.
I just think the money's there right now. It's set up in the CARES Act cost center now. That money's ready to spend. So budget will do that on Tuesday. They go ahead and do their PO for their 500,000 without having to set up a new cost center.
Question. Is David not? Why can't you doing that? Draw on multiple things.
It is tied to a vendor.
And that's the issue we're trying to
With the cost
address
center.
with the cost center. To allow him to get the best deal at the time that he wants the product, as opposed to buying it all at once. So, I mean,
Because yeah. So what the basic analogy was, mass that costs $1 today may cost 25 cents next month. It costs $3 next month. But we're not going to buy it all at once in anticipation of certain things going down. So that's why we had talked about the multiple buckets. And when Kelly was listening, she thought that would be easily doable as well. But I don't know.
Maybe I'm not using blanket right. He's authorized for 500.
Right.
He's authorized it, so if he wants to use 300.
Right. So basically what we thought, again, come back up here if I get off track. We were going to take $500,000 and say, David, this is for PPE. And PPE it's got a lot of things underneath it. Please, in the next 6 months or however long we've got, spend this money on that stockpiling what we're going to need for our employees here in the county for the next 2 years, essentially, because it's going to be, I mean, these things are good for 2.5 years on shelf life. So that's the thought. So that's what we committed, or that's what ERC recommended committing to that process thus far.
Which I totally agree with. I'm just going through the mechanics and how we set it up.
Yeah.
I mean, I totally agree. It's
that's
just
what we were
trying to figure out the financial system.
how best
Setting up a cost center is easy. That's not the issue. That's a great point to bring up. It kind of earmarks that money.
Yeah.
Since we're not tying it to one vendor, you can't create a PO, tie up that money. So
What if we started with COVID, where the money came in, we first did it? I wonder if these things come up, then we do create just start creating, going down. We got emergency management.
1400,
Right.
14, and that's what we had talked about, was just creating that 1400 is the number, and then 1400A would be emergency management, and it would be 500,000. And
There's
some
another
stuff
cost center to,
Is that doable? That was what I had in mind whenever I talked to Barnes, was that it would be like a sub-account that we move the money from the big account to a smaller account that he would be able to draw down off of. And that's what I was saying, maybe having facilities may need a sub-account, and we may need a salary sub-account. I don't necessarily think, until we get into cities and that kind of stuff, then maybe you want to do some projects or some other sub-accounts, but not just a whole bunch of them, but the ones that we know that they're going to need to make purchases on a fairly regular basis and have money available, especially Barnes and Monroe, maybe having something set up for them.
right, so right now, well, the fund is 1,400, so everything flows into on 1,400. So we've got 350 set up as a cost center right now. That's where the 47 million is parked right now. So we get a 351.
Yeah.
Emergency management, move 500 out of the 47 million down to that. And then set up cost centers for the buckets or whatever as we go forward.
Does that sound like a good plan for everybody?
Second.
Okay, we can't, I said earlier, we can't make a recommendation on the $500,000 because it's not here. That's not part of a policy and a procedure. However, we can make a recommendation on setting up the sub-account to enable a certain amount of money to be transferred into there. So do we want to, does somebody want to make a motion?
Kelly, did you hear that? For budget board on Tuesday.
Yes.
Thank you.
Who made that motion?
Miles.
Was it Miles? Yep. Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Davidson made the motion, Mr. Morrison seconded. And we're not done with this item yet, but just so we don't get too far off here. Ms. Mertens?
Aye.
Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Mr. Davidson?
Aye.
Mr. Lambert?
Aye.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Aye.
Ms. Lauren?
Aye.
Ms. Miller?
Aye.
And Compton is an aye. So we will recommend the budget board setting that up, and then they can put whatever amount they want to put. We discussed 500,000 earlier. Hopefully that's what it is. But
I'll make the motion on the tracker form.
to receive the form.
We do need
We'll
to.
start with receiving.
I'll second.
Okay. Mr. Lambert made a motion to receive the document. Ms. Mertens seconded. Ms. Mertens?
Aye.
Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Mr. Davidson?
Aye.
Mr. Lambert?
Aye.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Aye.
Ms. Lauren?
Aye.
Ms. Miller?
Aye.
Compton is an aye. Okay.
Are you gonna email these?
Cody, can you make sure that I get a copy of that?
That's what I was just going over to you.
I will hand deliver one to you as soon as I can see you.
And me
And
too,
Amy,
please.
I will bring one by to you. Just like I
All
did.
right. Thank you.
I'd be premature, but I will make a motion that we, for our next meeting, that we create this expense tracker form using this you hand out as the template to add fund number, check number, and invoice, and to get with my MIS department and see if they can create that on an info zone or where every department has access to it and can for us to review our next meeting.
Is InfoZone or we would put that? Oh,
Yeah.
you're just saying access to
Yeah.
whatever this, okay.
A fillable
Second.
form.
And for now, I understand what you had mentioned earlier about changing that date from December 30th.
Mhm.
But for now, I'd say let's leave that date. And if we need to change that later, we can. But maybe leave that on there just in the one instance that we're not doing reimbursements, but something happens and whatever. So, okay.
So InfoZone will keep it internal, correct?
Yes, yeah. Do you want to get with IT or do you want me to? Or somebody else in your
Does
motion?
your motion include the additions that we talked about?
Yeah, it is
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
And it-
One certain code to get with IT.
Second again.
Okay, Mr. Lambert has made a motion. Mr. Davidson has seconded that motion. I'll get with IT to work this document into our InfoZone internal web account that will include this information plus a box to insert the check number, a box to insert the fund number, and another box to be able to upload a digital image of the invoice and the check. Ms. Mertens?
Aye.
Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Mr. Davidson?
Aye.
Mr. Lambert?
Aye.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Aye.
Ms. Lawrence?
Aye.
Ms. Miller,
Aye.
and Compton is an aye. I will get that done ASAP. Is there any other discussion on this item?
So once we start getting an influx of fees, who will be the initial catch point for this?
It's up to the group.
You talking about these?
No, what we just established.
Right. Once it gets on there, we can get with IT. I'm happy to have IT send it to me, and I can make sure that all the boxes are checked and filled out and all of that if you want me to. And then that would just be, like I mentioned the other day, just checking to make sure that everybody, because if you miss a box, we're not going to consider it. I mean,
Isn't there a way that they could do this, that if they haven't clicked the box that it won't submit?
it very well may be able to. I'll talk to Dane about that.
My thought then is if they're able to do that, if it only goes into submission once everything is filled out and attached, then at that point, it could just get emailed out to all the members of the committee, and they can review it before the meeting, right? For the expediency. Just thought. That makes sense?
It does. I would just attach the agenda.
Mhm.
Well, I think it would still be attached.
Well, and
That's what I'm saying that you would get it once everything is checked.
All of us here are going to get an email every time.
Yeah.
what I was suggesting was that we would have one person that would get all of those, make sure everything is appropriate, and then we would get those linked on the next agenda item, and that way everybody would be able to see them.
Or if there was a report that would show you everything that's been submitted, you would only get a link. This has been submitted. Like we're just saying that maybe if you submit, you get a confirmation page or a confirmation number. And that would be trackable for each one. And then versus to get the individual ones, we would just have a link to everything that's been submitted in the database. That way you don't get stacks and stacks of paper. You can just refer to that one if you want to print off. That's kind of your way of monitoring which ones have already been done and which ones are still outlined. Just a different way of setting something up for us. You don't get stacks and stacks of paper.
The end user will need to be able to, once they hit submit, clearly they can print off, a summary of the ones they just did.
That's what I was thinking. If there was a way for you to see every entry in that database, then you could see that your entry was submitted.
Well,
sitting in that profile.
I think IT will definitely be able to go on there. I think once it's submitted, I think having a confirmation page, that pops up that says that it's been submitted, that they have, but I don't think we necessarily need everybody logging in there. And
no, I'm just thinking of those that would have.
I don't mean everybody. I just mean.
Yeah, I suppose those that would be privy to receiving a hard copy. Rather than getting a hard copy, you just have the ability to click onto it and see the instrument on the screen without having to have a paper document in front of it.
Well, if it's linked on the agenda, it's the same thing. It would be linked digitally to the agenda, and you just click on the link. Because, for instance, assessor, treasurer, District 3, District 1, if we all apply for a reimbursement, then for that next agenda, if those are the only four that we're considering, what I would imagine is whoever's creating that agenda item goes in and has assessor request and treasurer request, District 3 request, District 1 request, and it's a hyperlink just like it does now on our agendas. You click on it and it'll pull it up. So before the meeting, you can always go in and look and see what it is. I mean, I would think that we would have that no matter what on the agenda to where it's digital and you don't have to print it out if you don't want a hard copy. But I'm open to any ideas.
I think just as the end user filling it out, they hit submit, but they need some kind of printout, what they just did.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, then all that information would go, like you said, to an agenda. And, you know, like you said, it could be by treasurer, by office. They print it out, they have their copy, and then that sends it to an agenda. Whereas instead of them getting and then have to go submit it to an agenda.
No, I'm not talking about the individual submitting it to the agenda. Saying that they would upload, they would fill this out and hit whatever the button says, submit, and it submits it. And yeah, they, you know, them to be able to print out a copy, we can see if that's available. Then one of us would go in and make sure that all of those are done appropriately. For instance, you know, if somebody doesn't answer one of the drop-down questions, was this previously budgeted? Well, we can set up the system to where it won't let them submit it until it does it. But on the dialog box where it says purpose of expense, if that purpose is we needed the widget, I mean, that's not really sufficient. And so somebody, you think that's a submit?
Well, yeah, because I mean, they're gonna send that here and because we needed it, it's in a good defense.
I think Miles has it right. You set up the form, you hit on it too. We all fill out forms electronically and can't submit it unless it's completely filled out. If I can't fill out the form, I fill it out, but I fill it out incorrectly, that's on me. We trust our department directors, our elected officials to deal with millions of dollars. I'm sure they can figure out how to fill out a form correctly. In the event they don't, I would assume that as you're going through these, those department directors or elected officials are going to have the opportunity to hear so that you can ask additional questions. But I would caution in having one person as a central collection, simply because if something's missed, it's all on you.
Yeah,
If
I'll take it right to an agenda.
if it goes to everybody at the same time, then I think it's a much better deal. And I've been a central collection point, as many of you have, and I understand the need of, is it filled out correctly or not from the beginning? But I also think it's just simpler to have it go to everybody the first time.
So
And I really agree with you.
You know, if they didn't
Would
fill
you go
out
to the back
correctly
row?
and get to an agenda, we just have them wait a week.
And I will make the comment right now to what Joe said. If somebody does apply for this and you see that it's on the agenda, you need to be here to be able to answer questions because there's no telling whether it'll be questions or not. And I think the Colonel, your boss, has mentioned it before. If you got an agenda item, you need to be here to be able to discuss it. So
it'll be up to them to follow up to see if and when, what agenda it will be in.
yeah, well, that was if we had a central person that was doing it, or we had somebody I was going to suggest that they would email the departments and say, your agenda, your item is on for consideration on the Tuesday, June, whatever meeting. But we can let them.
Get bogged down with that?
Well, no, but that's why I said I'm open to suggestions. completely. I just want to make sure that to the greatest extent possible, we don't miss things. We're able to move as fast as possible and we get it done.
Let's take what Mr. Blau so eloquently put and agreed with me on, and then take it with Mr. Morrison's stuff. And I think instead of it going to each one of us, the idea of it going to a central database that can be pulled down by every single one of us at any given time. You see all the attachments. And the individuals that submitted, they have the ability just to look at their one and their only thing that they themselves submitted. And then there's a little box in whatever form we create that says your item has been accepted, check. You will be on date XYZ agenda, check. So they know not only that they have been accepted, that they also have been scheduled, and they know what that date and time is.
So who's going in and putting?
Well, the clerk does that already.
Okay.
See how mad Kelly gets here in a second.
And would there need to be some type of an approved or disapproved at that point in time when it's all said and done, that it's gone through, that way that database shows its entries, process, and it's been approved. It comes off the box that way down the road 3 months from now when we go back to the list. Were there any of those that either have not been approved or been approved?
Okay.
There hasn't been a status of unknown.
I like your point of, and especially Butch's point of everybody being here to defend their deal. But if David Barnes isn't here for ordering PPE, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. And there are going to be a bunch of them that we could probably all agree that are going to be self-explanatory. I don't know how many of them are going to need to be explained, so I don't know how many times we're actually going to need to reach out to the individuals to tell them to appear. And maybe that's one of those things that, as this database is created and each of us are able to see the purpose of expense, if one person has a question, they can email whomever submitted it and said, I'm going to have a question about this. I'd like you to be there. Does that?
Yeah, but I think you may not have a question ahead of time, but you think of a question last minute. So I just think, and I do understand that not everybody will be able to be available, but what we've done in the past is if you have an item on the agenda and you're not available, you either have somebody ready to speak to it or you email somebody on the committee that they can, be ready to answer questions. So just cover your bases, make sure that there's somebody available to answer questions. It may not be able to be you, and things happen, but communicate.
We've been doing a really good job with the communication on the emergency response committee to where either they'll email Joe or they'll email Barnes or myself or somebody that's on the committee to give their report for whatever department or such that they need. I mean, I've given reports for Grant's department. Joe's given them for everybody under the sun, and it's worked really well. So,
okay, well, what I can do is get with IT and figure out what our capabilities are, because we need to be able to figure out on InfoZone, can we create something like this and give 8, well, we probably need 9 for Kelly, 9 logins for us to be able to log in there to be able to see what's been submitted. Are we able to do that? And then are we able to, in turn, give the person that filled out the form, to your point, you wanted them to be able to get on there and just see their form. So is there an ability for them to turn around and log back in and see their form? So those are questions that I don't know the answer
Some kind of
to.
a status to it as well, whether it's been, otherwise, a month from now, you're going to pull up something that's going to be 100 of them. And you're going to have to weed through the ones that try to find what you're looking for, right?
Yeah, obviously.
The ones that are active or closed.
yeah, once they're closed, we want them all.
Yeah.
But to Christy's point, the receipt aspect of your submission, that's the same thing that we get when we apply for the grants and use our SAM number and kind of list that your stuff was received.
Yeah.
So that's just insurance for the individuals. But
Yeah, I think that's probably getting at least a page after you hit submit that says your item has been submitted. And if you have any questions, contact, and then have a phone number and the name of somebody to contact. I think bare minimum, the system should be able to do something like that. Beyond that, I don't know what it can do. And I don't want 100 of them stacked up in there. My idea is we set a deadline, and we'll get to that in just a minute. But if you want something considered for next Tuesday, you have until Friday or Thursday, whatever the deadline is, to get it submitted. And if you have it submitted and you have a confirmation that it did get submitted, it's going to be on that next meeting. And then after that, it's gone off of there. We shouldn't constantly be going back and looking, because then we're going to miss something that's in there. And then so on Friday, say we set the deadline on Friday, then whoever's going in there, whether it's all of us or one of us, goes in and says, oh, we're 1 minute past the deadline. There's been 6 applications for reimbursement or for in the future, future purchases when we get to that. There's 6 things in here. I need to make sure that we get these 6 things on the agenda, and those 6 things then get added to the agenda.
There's even an option you could say, like, your name, include your email, and then when upon submission, it emails you what you submitted. That would be your receipt that it was returned. Yeah. Something like that, if it's an option.
Yeah.
That way you know they went through and verified.
so with your methodology that you just did, that's assuming that we approve every item. What happens if we hold one item with more information under that? We're just going to tell them to be at the next meeting?
Mhm.
Okay. I'm good with that.
Yeah.
I think you say cover all these
I do.
suspenders, belt.
Belt and suspenders. Best approach.
A second.
So, well, I don't necessarily, because we don't know what we can or can't do on any of that. So when I talk to IT about setting up this form, adding these extra boxes, I'll visit with them also on what they can do to get it set up to where each of us can just log in, if at all possible, to see what's there and see if the individual that filled it out can get on there. If they can't, what mechanism do we need to utilize? And I can bring that back to everybody.
Great.
I mean, do you think we should for that?
You can also check and see if it, in addition to having a central point, that it also pushes it out to us.
Did it also what?
Pushes it out to us individually. So it'll be in both spots.
You want to put. Christie's afraid of all the emails.
I am too.
I just see they submit it, and it gets to an agenda, pull the agenda, review them, have them.
Right.
Maybe I'm oversimplifying.
But-
And of course, when they get submitted, been submitted with,
I'm not disagreeing with anybody.
a
I just
review,
wonder is the capability there? That was all my question.
And I don't know that.
Yeah.
Christie, to your point, they fill it out and it's submitted. Then what's the next step to make sure it gets on the agenda?
It goes straight to an agenda. It gets submitted straight to an, like, I'll sit down and say, I'm gonna do all mine from March 1st through May 15th. And I'll probably do, hit submit. It'd be nice if it says, do you have another one? Yes. We go through the form, you do them. And then you do submit, and says, do you have any others? No. And then it prints off my little sheet of all of them with the total.
Right.
And that is routed directly to an agenda. And it's at that agenda that we pull, and it would say a link to the treasurer's stuff, and you could click on the link and up pops the spreadsheet of what I just did.
But right now, we have to manually go into Legistar, create the agenda item, do our attachments. unless there's an interface that we can build between,
Well, and I see what you're saying.
that's what I'm getting
So
at.
then that person would, once they're done with, they sat down, did 1 to 10, I don't know, and it does a summary, they would scan that in and get it attached. And then they know what date, because they're picking the agenda date, they'll know when to show up, they'll know if that's been approved through the Legistar, and then, you know, we're gonna start meeting weekly. The cutoffs are there, already built into Legistar, and then we pull them, and then when we want to review them, if we want to review them before the meeting, we just click on the link, just like anything else we review.
Could it just be one item with all the attachments on it?
Not if everybody
Everyone's
is
doing their own.
doing their own. They
That's what I'm
can't.
saying. If we kept it central and not allowing everybody and their dog to go in there and start doing it.
Everybody and their dogs is on the agenda.
Right, I understand that, but then there's.
See,
But
trying to make
it
it
would
quick.
group them together, like it would be under COVID, or we could tell Sharon, you know, when these come in, we could say that it's a COVID thing, and then
Kelly.
group them together.
Kelly does the agendas for the PT, so Kelly, can you weigh in on this?
I was just going to say that it seems to me it makes more sense to have one agenda item with all the different things attached under it. And it's easy to look that up in Legistar to see what that agenda item is. And you can just, I think you can just keep attaching links to that particular item. If not, I'm not positive about that because I don't know if it matters who's created the agenda item and who has access to be able to attach to that. But I could certainly attach them for someone if it might be easier just to send them to me in an email.
I think if we had one agenda item with all the applications on it, then you can attach all those in Legistar instead of each department doing their own. Does that sound good?
Yes.
Second.
sounds like what I was talking about earlier.
Yeah. Come closer.
Where's Joe? He said that you're not supposed to do it like that. So an individual will fill out an application, and then the application, if they've done everything correctly, it gets submitted. It'll have the attachments with it. Then IT will have all of that in the system. So IT is going to then take or give somebody, the central collector, the ability to go in to InfoZone and get all of that information that's there and get it to Kelly to attach to an agenda.
Yes. I like that motion.
I didn't make a motion.
Sounds like Kenny made it into a motion and seconded.
Sounds like it.
All in favor?
Okay, so do you guys still want me to check with IT and see if the other process will work? Okay.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you right, it would be IT that would, every Friday at a certain time, would run this report and get it to Kelly.
Well, I don't know if IT would necessarily run the
That's
report.
what I'm thinking. I was thinking each person would print theirs off and email it to Kelly, but that seems easier.
I think, to me, that's easier. So if we can, after the deadline,
Kelly has to.
Why can't Kelly just run the report?
well, she can, whoever, that's what I'm saying, whoever logs in there, either IT sends all of this stuff via email attachment to one person, or that one person logs into InfoZone and has access to get all of that and pull it out. It doesn't really matter, one way or the other, they can get that and it gets to Kelly and gets attached to the agenda. Do what?
I like that. Let's just make sure. Check with IT if it works. Yeah. If I review it again, join the agenda.
That's where.
Okay, and then, so Okay, I'll make that motion. Are you seconding? Okay.
Really clear on that.
You want to clear that one
Clear on
up?
that?
We're gonna run dual track. I'm gonna check with IT and see if they can do it to where everybody has access to it, and also whether they can set it up to where Kelly has access to be able to log in, or IT has access to be able to get all the information and send it to you. One way or another, you'll get it to be able to attach it to an agenda.
Okay,
Okay. Ms. Mertens?
Aye.
Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Mr. Davidson?
I think.
Mr. Lambert?
Aye.
Mr. Honeycutt?
That's your, what the motion was.
Ms. Lauren? I'm not
Aye.
here. Ms. Miller?
Aye.
And I'll vote aye.
Cody, I didn't catch who seconded.
And that was the illustrious Mr. Lambert.
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 French Canadian.
From Toronto. All right, and between now and our next meeting, if you would, take a look at the first 2 pages of this. I've got it in Word, so I was definitely going to go in and change, where it mentions, things specific to Tulsa County. I'll change it to Oklahoma County and whatnot, but if there's any other changes that you guys want made to this, let me know. But otherwise, I'll have this, because what I would like to do, once we know exactly how it's going to be set up after I get with IT, then I'll get screenshots of all of this with with the cover letter, kind of like what Terry did here, and I'll email it out to the everyone group. That way everybody has instructions, they've got screenshots, and everybody will be on the same page. So please look at that later. As far as looking at other things, let me go ahead and pass 2 other items out. This is the affidavit that Tulsa County is using.
Motion to receive documents.
Second.
Mr. Davidson made the motion to receive the documents. Ms. Mertens seconded the motion. Ms. Mertens?
Aye.
Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Mr. Davidson?
Aye.
Mr. Lambert?
Aye.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Aye.
Ms. Lauren?
Aye.
Ms. Miller?
Aye.
And Compton is an aye. And I'm going to pass out now the application that Tulsa County is utilizing. It's titled Municipality Request for Reimbursement Application.
Motion to receive documents.
Second.
Mr. Davidson made a motion to receive the document. Ms. Miller seconded. Vote here. Ms. Mertens?
Aye.
Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Mr. Davidson?
Aye.
Mr. Lambert?
Aye.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Aye.
Ms. Lauren?
Aye.
Ms. Miller?
Aye.
And Compton is an aye. And to Miles's point earlier, I think we're still early on this stuff. We obviously won't need an affidavit signed by internal folks, and we're not really ready on the city stuff, but I wanted to get that to everybody. That way you can start thinking about the language in those, and if you want to utilize something like that, and if so, what kind of language modifications, guide them as an update from this group. That way
Yes.
I can let the budget board know that we're visiting with IT about setting this up, and we're looking at the reimbursable pieces right now, and we're still working on processes and procedures that we're going to look at in the near future for internal future.
Yes, I will.
purposes. Is there anything else on item 3? Anybody want to discuss? All right. Item number 4, discussion and possible action to discuss times and dates for future special meetings to develop a specific schedule for the BET to meet regularly.
We were waiting to find out if the DA was going to be in that rotation. We worked backwards. I don't know if at this time where we are, if we just want to set one for next week. Let that play out, see what we find out about with IT on the thing.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. The earliest we can meet next week would be Tuesday at 4. That's even pushing it. So we need to be probably a Wednesday would be the earliest that we'd be able to get together.
About Wednesday, 1 o'clock. 2 o'clock.
So Tuesday at 1.
Wednesday at 1.
I'm sorry, Wednesday. It's been a long day. I can do one, just let you guys know, the City of Oklahoma City and City County Health wanted me on a call with them next week, and it's at 2 o'clock. So I may have to step out at 2.
I got 3.
We were at 11 o'clock.
Got PBA and BOCC on Wednesday.
That'll be done by
It'll
then.
certainly be done, but
We'll do 11.
11.
Is that fine with everybody? Works for me. For you guys? Those of you
yeah.
joining us remotely, does that work for you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wednesday at 11? Okay, so we'll go ahead and set that for 11 on Wednesday. Kelly, can you go ahead and post the meeting for us at some point before Tuesday at 11? Or yeah, no, we have to get that posted today. Yeah. Yeah, because we won't be here Monday. Oh, yeah.
We have Friday. Yeah,
What
you're right. So you
specific
got it
items?
going now.
What specific items do we want on that other than the IT?
Would just these agenda items still work?
Just these? Okay.
I would,
And a big, broad policies and procedures.
my intent is to have item number 2 as a standing agenda item, item number 3 as a standing agenda item, number 4, at least for some time, to be a standing agenda item. Item number 5, I would like a standing agenda item. There's not a motion, well, I guess in policies and procedures, I would like something that's on there as a recommendation to budget board, discussion of possible action to make a recommendation to budget board regarding CARES funding. That way we have I think if we had that, we could have made a recommendation on Mr. Barnes's. So have that as a standing.
You could do it that way. Or you could do it the way Joe said, and just change receipt to regarding.
But that would just apply to the emergency response committee and not to others. If we have other entities that all of a sudden we need to do something quick.
Yeah.
So, and then as we move forward, we wouldn't address a recommendation item under the general just catch-all. We would have a specific agenda item as we move forward. But
Make sure that it's on there.
okay. And if anybody else wants an agenda item, just send it to Ms. Henley and she will take care of you. And then the rest of the meeting schedule, we'll get it figured out in the near future.
Gotta figure out our steps.
Yeah. Changing. Number 2. From receive to regarding, correct? Discussion of possible action regarding an update from the emergency response committee.
Yeah.
That way, anything that comes out of that committee here can be,
Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And please, when she sends that agenda out, please review and make sure everything that we ask to be put on there is, so we have time to change it.
Yeah, we'll have till tomorrow at 11. No, we get 24 hours to change it, so Tuesday at 11. Just has to be posted by tomorrow. And I'm ready to go home.
I'll second.
It's been a long week. All right, is there a motion, well, first, board comments. Does anybody have any comments? All right, seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Mr. Davidson motions to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Lambert seconds. Ms. Mertens?
Aye.
Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Mr. Davidson?
Aye.
Mr. Lambert?
Aye.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Aye.
Ms. Warren?
Aye.
Ms. Miller?
Aye.
And Compton is an aye. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
No, I thought.